Bright Tuty.
Hello everyone.
Every student matters.
So students, let's start our new chapter here. That is chapter number 14. And the chapter's name is Institutions of Parliamentary Democracy. Now before starting the chapter, students, let me tell you about the chapter. What are we going to learn in this chapter? So as the name suggests here, that is Institutions of Parliamentary Democracy. It means that we are going to understand, first of all, the term institutions. We are going to talk about why do we need a government. We are going to talk about parliament, the role of the parliament. We are going to understand the three organs of the government, that is the executive, legislature and the judiciary. Okay. Apart from that, we are also going to talk about the different parts here. We are going to understand how does the Lok Sabha work, how does the Raj Sabha work, okay, and what is the main role of these leaders, the executive branch when we are talking about, the legislature when we are talking about, okay. So we are going to understand all these important points in this chapter. Now starting with the first topic here, let us try to understand what do we mean by these political institutions. So you can see that the name of the chapter itself is Institutions of Parliamentary Democracy, right? So you might be wondering, what do we understand by this term, that is parliamentary democracy? You might be thinking that what is this parliamentary system or the parliamentary kind of government that we have in our country? So first of all, let us try to understand these important terms since you are reading political science, okay? So all these terms such as institutions, parliamentary democracy, these terms are of real value and very important. So when we are talking about the parliamentary system of government, what does that mean? It means that it is a system of government in which the executive branch of the government, it has a direct or indirect support of the parliament. Now the term parliament here, are you aware of this term parliament? Yes, you might have seen in the TV when we are talking about the Lok Sabha, the Raj Sabha. In fact, in your previous chapter, students, you have read about the importance of elections in any democratic kind of government, right? So when we are talking about elections, it means that we are electing our representatives, correct or not? Yes. So when we are electing these representatives, who are these representatives that we are talking about? These are the leaders who take the responsibility of making the laws, changing the laws for the country, right? Executing these laws. So here when we are talking about the terms such as legislature, when we are talking about the executive branch, when we are talking about the judiciary, it means that we are talking about these institutions, right? That our constitution, it has laid down these institutions, the roles of these institutions, and to see that they are working properly in a given system. So first of all, let us talk about the government. Now, can you imagine, when we are talking about our own country, let's say, can you imagine a country without any government? When we are talking about any country, we need a government, right? To run all the things very smoothly, to make the laws so that each and every individual, they can live peacefully, right? So they can abide the laws that the government has made for us. So here we know that the term government is really important. In previous chapters as well, you have heard this term and you have learnt about the importance of government. But here in detail, we are going to understand why do we need a government? Why is it necessary for us to have a government in any country? Okay. So here we can say that in very simple terms that government is the form of organization of state. Now, if anyone tells you that, you have to play cricket and no one is giving you any rule that how do we have to play this cricket. If you are playing cricket for the first time and you don't know that how many balls are there in an over, and when do we call it that we have crossed the boundary direct and it's called a six, or when we are talking about force, right? So all these terms, when you are playing cricket, you can relate it to any game, your favorite game, such as Kho-Kho, it can be chess, it can be any game that you play, right? You have interest. Now, if no one is giving you any rule regarding that game, will you be able to play that game? Obviously not. Everyone requires some rules, right, related to any game. If you are playing it, you should know the rules that how we have to play that game. The same way, here when we are talking about any country, we need a government. We need some laws according to which the government has to run, right? So you can easily connect with this part here, right, students, that why do we need a government? Though we are learning about it in a separate topic here, but when we have to define that what is this government, we can call it as a form of organization of the state. Now, how do we define a state? In India, you know that there are so many states. People are living in these states. Now, if anyone asks you about your state, you can tell, okay, I am living in Madhya Pradesh, I live in Bihar, I live in Uttar Pradesh, I live in Rajasthan, and so on. But how do we define this term that is state? So in very simple terms, state is defined as a political organization of people in a defined territory. Now, when you have a look at the map of India, I would suggest each and every student to have a look at the map of India and look at all the states. You will find a defined boundary for each and every state. Am I correct or not, students? Yes. So you will find these defined boundaries, defined territory. People are living inside this defined territory, right? And we call that particular area as a state. So in simple terms, we can define state as a political organization of people, right? People are living in that particular state. I'm talking about different states. It can be Madhya Pradesh, it can be Gujarat, it can be West Bengal, it can be any state. But each and every state has a defined territory, which is an important point that you have to note down. Okay? So state is defined as a political organization of people who are living in this defined territory. Now, when we are talking about states, now what are some of the important elements that any state requires here? So there are 4 essential pillars or elements on which a state stands. Now, what are these 4 elements or essential pillars? The first one being the population. Do you agree with this point, students? In your mind, you can definitely think about it, right? So whenever we are talking about any state, a defined territory, people are living in that territory. So population is an essential pillar, right? Then we are talking about territory. The term territory itself definitely becomes an essential pillar, right? Defined area in which people are living. The third and the most important that we can say, the essential pillar here is government. Can you imagine any state without any government? Like I told you that you can't imagine to play any game, your favorite game, be it badminton, be it basketball, be it volleyball, any game. If no one is giving you the rules, how can you play that game? Will you enjoy playing that game? Obviously not, students. So therefore, whenever we are talking about any particular state or whenever we are talking about our country as a whole, we can't imagine our country without any government. Because if there are no rules, there is no one to make the laws, there is no one to see that how these laws are working. So can people live peacefully? Definitely not. So therefore, government becomes an essential pillar or essential feature of any state. The last one being the sovereignty. Here the state should have the supreme power. It should have the power to make the decisions, to make the laws. Again, this is an important feature and essential pillar of any particular state. So till now we have understood the meaning of state and the essential pillars of state. Now whenever we are talking about these essential pillars, there are certain points that you must keep in mind. Now when we are talking about the territory, is the territory fixed? Yes, we have a defined boundary. So the land on which people live, it is fixed. We can't change it. It can be changed when the government, in your senior classes, you will learn about how the laws can be made and the boundary of a particular state can be changed. But when we are talking about the land on which people they are living, it is a fixed boundary, right? The second point is that size of population. When we are talking about population, is it fixed or not? Can population be ever fixed, students? Definitely not. It is increasing only, right? So here when we are talking about population, definitely the number of people living in that defined territory, it can vary. It can increase or it may decrease. People can move from one state to another, from one territory to another. Okay. Another important point here is that a state needs a government. Like I told you, we can't imagine a state without any government. Now, if there is a state without any government, what situation will be there? What kind of situation will be there? So it would be like an anarchy. Now, when I am telling the term anarchy, what does that mean? It means that any state, a situation where there is no government, absence of government. Okay, the term anarchy, it means absence of government. Now, can you think that that state can run efficiently if there is no government? Definitely not. So, till now you are understanding the importance of government here. That anywhere, whenever we are talking about any country in the whole world, we definitely need a government. The nature of the government can definitely vary. It can be a democratic form of government. It can be a monarchical form of government. It can be autocratic form of government, right? There can be military dictatorship. The nature of the government can vary, but definitely we need the government that look after the welfare of the people. Okay. Here, when we are talking about governing a country, definitely students, it is a tedious task, right? If anyone has the responsibility of governing a large country, when we are talking about our own country with a population of 1.33 billion people, isn't it tough to govern such a large population? Definitely it is difficult. So governing a country, it involves various activities. Now, what are these various activities? What are the responsibilities of these government when we are talking about them specifically, their role? So government is responsible for ensuring the security of the citizens. Yes or not? Yes. Definitely government is responsible for taking care of the people, for its citizens who are living in that particular country. Apart from that, providing facilities for education and health. Do you agree with this point? Yes, you will agree with this point. Why? Because in our own country, we can see how the government, the central government or the state government, they are providing facilities, free education to the underprivileged children. Apart from that, free health facilities to the people who cannot afford it, right? They cannot afford to go to the private hospitals. So this is the role of the government, providing education and health facilities, some of the basic necessities, right? Apart from that, collecting the taxes. Now, regarding this point, you can ask your parents about how do they pay the taxes, right, students? Each and every individual who is earning, they have to pay a certain amount to the government. Now, this amount that they are paying as tax is the amount that is the government spending on administration, on defense, on development programs, on various schemes, right? So this is how the government is getting the money to spend on certain activities, right? And it is again for the welfare of the common people. Apart from that, it formulates and implements several welfare schemes. Now, when I am talking about welfare schemes, since you are a grown-up children now, you will understand all these points. Okay? So, based on what you have learned earlier, you have learned so many points about the government in your previous classes as well. And here you have to understand some detail. You have to basically have a detailed understanding of all these points here. So, when we are talking about the welfare schemes, here you must have heard about Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, schemes such as that, right? When we are talking about Digital India, National Health Mission, right? Then we have so many projects for states as well. So here Jan Dhan Yojana for the poor people, they should have account, and the government taking care of all these poor people who do not have enough money. So they are depositing money whenever there is a situation of crisis and so on. So several welfare schemes related to education, related to health, related to digitalization. So all these points, all these schemes, they are for the welfare of the common people. But who is doing this? Who is implementing all these welfare schemes? This is the main question. It is the government, right, students? So these are some of the activities that the government is performing. So here you have to understand why government is important and why the situation of anarchy is not good for any country, not any kind of government, but any country or any state. Here, when we are talking about the role of government, we also need to understand that there might be disputes that can happen in the country related to the implementation of all these schemes or all these ideas. So therefore, to attend to all these tasks, several arrangements they have been made in modern democracies, and such arrangements are known as institutions. So this is an important point that we need to understand here. The term institutions itself. So political institutions, they have been made in the country. The constitution has laid down basic rules on the powers and functions of these institutions. Yes, you are aware of the term constitution, right? So the rule of the book of law, it contains so many laws, and this is according to these laws a government or a country has to work or has to run. Correct, students? So they have laid down some basic rules on the powers and functions of these institutions. Now when we are talking about these institutions, here you have to remember these names, because in your later topics we are going to learn about these terms only. Executive branch, legislature and the judiciary branch here. Very important point here, students. Now another important point that we have to keep in mind is that institutions, they make it difficult to have a good decision taken very quickly. Now what do we understand by this sentence? Here when we are talking about these political institutions, there are so many people involved in these branches, these organs of governments, right? So when there are so many people taking the decisions, definitely all these decisions, they will take time to happen, right? So there are so many views that they have to put down. And apart from that, each and every individual will have their own opinions regarding any issue. So definitely they can't take any decision in a haste or very quickly. So here we can see that when the decisions are taken carefully, it does not lead to any bad decision. Now this is an important point related to these political institutions. So that is why the democratic governments, they insist on these institutions such as the executive, legislature and judiciary. Now here, till now we have understood about the state, about the meaning of government, why do we need government, what are some of the activities. In short, we have understood this point. We also have talked about the political institutions. In our next topic, we are going to learn about the need for the government. Thank you very much.